All right, hello everybody. Thank you for coming and viewing this video. This video is actually going to be part one of a two-part video series where I'll be exploring the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code for a calculator app that I built. Again, this is going to be part one, and in part one, I'll be first walking you through the HTML and CSS files that, one, show you the HTML tags used for the structure of the app, and also discussing the use of the div tags to lay out the calculator interface. So as far as the numbers, the basic operator buttons, and then also the equals buttons and the clear button show you where I place those. And then also I'll be showing you how I formatted and styled the calculator using CSS. And then in the next series, or in the next video in this series, I'll be walking through the JavaScript code to explain the logic behind the calculator. All right, so let's dive on into it. As you can see on the right side of my screen, we have the dev tools up now in the web page alongside with the actual calculator, and that's just because I want to go down through these different div and button elements that are within inside the body tag or the body element, just so kind of explaining my logic behind the structure too. So as you can see, as you highlight each and every different div or container, you can show how they highlight here. So that's what I want to show and clarify for you guys. All right, so let's just get started with the class grid container. So my idea for that, or the logic behind making this div, was to basically create a container, a grid container, where I could utilize the grid positioning tool or technology to properly and easily align all the different buttons and displays within this container. But as you can see right here, again, I have my cursor on the div that has the class of grid container, and it's encompassing all the different buttons and displays there. So that's what that display or that grid container is. So right under that grid container, we have another div as its child and as an ID display, and that again that represents the display where all the text is going to be output. So like when you do 9 plus 9, 9 and 9 will appear on the screen, and then once you press the equal sign, it will equate to 18. All right, so after the div element, the display element, let's just see here. I want to be corrected when I say it. Okay, so it has a bunch of siblings. It's not direct child elements. And so after, again, that display element, we have a bunch of buttons, right? These are all the buttons that we're going to be pressing in order to, simulate the functionality of an actual calculator. So starting from the top, we have the delete button. Then we have the CE button, which I'm going to be very transparent with you. I have no idea what the function of this button does. Didn't program anything into it. It's kind of just there to look pretty. We have the clear button, which actually does have the functionality, clears out the display, clears out any current calculations going on in the calculator. Then we have the division. Then we have the number 7, 8, 9. Then we have the multiply operator. Then we have 4, 5, 6. Then we have the minus operator. Then we have 1, 2, 3. Then we have plus. A plus symbol button, and then we have 0, and then we have equal, which actually when you are doing a calculation, say if you're doing 3 plus 3, you can plus equals, and it's going to populate and calculate 6. So that's actually the basic structure of in terms of the HTML. As you can see here on the right, on the left, I already have my CSS up, so I can go ahead and start getting into that and discussing that. All right, so CSS, cascading style sheet. I'm going to go ahead and explain how I made this calculator here look so pretty, or at least presentable. So on the left side, I have my CSS file. So I'm going to go ahead and start from the top. So as you can see, I have this little asterisk symbol, and then I have some pseudo elements after it that basically say things that are before it or after it. And basically what I'm doing is selecting all the elements and then assigning them properties such as box sizing, border box, which I think is really important. Well, at least for me, it's helped me out a lot. And what it does, and maybe I'm explaining this a little wrong, but this is how I interpret it. But box sizing, when you set it to border box, it kind of not quote unquote collapses, but it kind of combines the margin and border, the margin and padding and the border together of an element, so that you can more easily manipulate them. So if I had this actually set the content box, and I adjusted the height and the width of any of my elements, then I would have to calculate and understand what my padding and margins were doing, because then that would kind of add to those those pixels. And then over here I set the padding and margin to 0 just to make it more easily, so just to make it easier for me to style and size all the different the grid container, the elements, and all the buttons. All right, so moving on to the body element, I'm going to describe it here. The body element is actually the container element for which or parent element for which our calculator is in. So this is kind of how I centered, or just like making all these setting all these properties to the body element is how I got this centered. So if you look, I first set the body element to the display flex. Then I justify the content to make align it horizontally, or align it horizontally in the center, and then align items to align it vertically in the middle. I set the height of the body to 100% of the viewport height, so that it just takes place of all basically what the browser viewport. And then I set the font size to 100% so that the when I type in the display, or the way that these elements appear here, can pull up and look like that you can visibly see them. All right, so next, moving down to the grid container, and again, that's just like the container that is responsible for hosting all these other elements, or all the display text, the buttons, and all that good jazz. And I originally set it with a background color of, I'm not sure what this is, but it's like a grayish color. I set the minimum width of the actual container to be 25%, so 25% of its parent container. So it's going to always be like, no matter how I adjust it. Hold on, I'm going to put it up here. So just maximize it. See how I got a little bit bigger? That's actually, the width of this is actually 25% of the body element, because I set it to 25%, and that's the parent element. I set the min height to 65%. That's why it's always like about this tall. And then what I did is I set this container to grid. I could have used flex, but I'm going to be honest with you, I find grid to be a lot easier to utilize in terms of like layouts and styling things, and I'll get into that a little bit later, and actually probably in a future video explain why I have such trouble with flex, but it's for another video. So again, the grid containers display grid, and then I did grid template columns to create these four. Well, it's actually distributed throughout all these containers, but you're going to see I have this. I have basically 4 columns, and that's where these buttons lie. I mean, the display text has 4 columns as well, but if you look down, go hashtag display, this is the ID for it. You can see down here I had this grid column, and the grid column property, and I set it to 1. Have the hash, the slash, and then -1, which basically means that this grid display is going to span across all 4 columns. So it's just going from the start to the end. And if you look here, I have display text, and again, that's so if you look at display text, that is just where the text is actually going to be displayed within the display. So it's actually a child element to the display element. And basically I just set it to display flex, justify content flex start, so that it could horizontally start at the beginning. So if I press 5 here, you can see it starts closer to the start. Like if I did this, flex end, control S, it's going to start at the end. So if I just go back, flex start, it's back at the end. So bam. And set the minimum width to 100% of the parent element, so like that so that display text can take up 100% of the parent display width. So that's actually all of the HTML and CSS in a nutshell. That's kind of how I got it here. And in the next video, I'll explain how I got this functionality and how I got when I pressed these buttons to get it to do what I wanted it to do.